there, I'm Melody Fletcher, and I want to welcome you to the Conscious Conversations series. The idea behind these conversations is that, as it turns out, black people and white people don't really talk to each other about race. Okay, black people talk about race all the time, but white people, not so much. We don't really know how to. It's uncomfortable and potentially very risky. I mean, what if we say something ignorant? Well, yeah, that's probably totally going to happen. But that doesn't mean that we can just ignore these conversations. So, some friends and I decided to have those conversations publicly. Huge, massive gratitude and appreciation to everyone who agreed so readily to participate in these conversations with me and so generously share their insights, wisdom, and time with me. I won't keep you any longer. I hope that you enjoy today's conscious conversation. All right, welcome back to Conscious Conversations. This is Melody Fletcher, and today I have with me the wonderful Makhosi Candace Pitts. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She is the Royal Shaman from theroyalshaman.com. Welcome, Makhosi. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. And yes, you you did fine. You can just call me, just Makhosi is fine.
Yeah.
But
I don't have to say the whole name. Okay. Madame Makhosi. Candace Third.
It's like Prince Makhosi.
Right. Oh yeah, Makhosi. Okay. There you go. All right. Well, Makhosi, why don't you start us off by kind of telling us a little bit about who you are and what wonderful things you're doing in the world.
So I am an authentic African shaman and soul ascension expert. And I typically work with high achievers, helping them to find their purpose and create absolutely extraordinary, impact-driven businesses and life. So, yeah, my work has taken me into some very interesting places, for sure. But my background, I think, lends itself really well to these sorts of conversations. So I'm really excited to kind of.
I'm really excited for you to be here too, and I have so many questions for you that aren't even like, related to race, because I'm like, African shaman, dude, we have to talk. But we will, not today's topic. So obviously you are African American, or if you don't mind,
Okay, yeah. So just so people have a
something didn't ping right there, so I'm just gonna pause.
Yeah, so I'm super mixed, Caucasian, Native American, and African American, and each of those there's like a lot of blend. So I like to say, like, I'm the bridge between the physical and the spiritual world, but also the bridge between many groups, like in physical form.
Yes, I love that. And so you know the United States culture very well, and we're just gonna get right into it. I like to be blunt and like to get right into it. So your experience of being a person of color in the United States is going to always be a unique one. I mean, every person has their unique experience, but you being this, shaman, this person who understands energy and wielding, real power, I'd love to hear your perspective of what it is like for you. So, I mean, I never ask anybody to speak for the entire Black community, or the entire Native American community. Like, do what you're inspired to do, obviously, but I'm really interested in your experience of how you walk through the world when it comes to the issue of race.
I would definitely say, and some people may not really understand it, but even though I'm mixed and I've had mixed experiences, there's like a certain type of experience that we have when we're mixed, especially as a kid. It's almost like you're not white enough to be in one group, you're not Black enough to be in the other group, and there's a lot of certain stereotypes that go along with that, because even in the Black community there's also colorism that's like a whole other level to dig into. But for the most part, especially because of where I grew up. So I grew up in small town, southern West Virginia, and in Nitro, West Virginia. And it was at the time, it's a little bit better now, but at the time it was nicknamed Whitro because it was so white.
Oh
And
God.
yeah, I grew up experiencing a lot of racism, a lot, like at least every week there was something happening. So I don't remember all of it. I blocked out a lot of it. But I say because of that experience growing up mixed in a white community, I live I live my life as a Black woman. There's no one that's looking at me and is confusing me with being white. There are some people who are mixed who can quote unquote pass, and clearly I'm not. So, you know, I have locks. I didn't always have those, but my facial features, I'm not passing. No one's buying that. So I would say most of my perspective is coming from having the Black experience, but then also, you know, it just being kind of colored with different things because I did end up eventually going to an HBCU, a historically Black college or university. And
Thank you.
that was also that was a different type of experience as well. And then going to Africa and being an African-American, being light-skinned, there was so many other different experiences. So I think a lot of different
I
perspectives.
want to hear about that if I can.
Yes.
But let's rewind just a little bit before we go to Africa. So you grew up in this really, really, really white place where I'm guessing you weren't mixed to anybody. You were just Black. Like that was it. But then you went to a Black university. And did you expect like that you'd be coming home, that there'd be like, those are your people? Like, what was the expectation versus the reality?
Yeah, I definitely had some excitement about that because I was like, oh my gosh, finally, like I don't have to deal with all of this drama. Like coming out of it, just to give you a little perspective. So my senior year of high school, I didn't go to my high school prom because I only went to one dance. And that was because I happened to have a boyfriend at the time, not because guys were lining up. I could not get a date to save my life. So I didn't go to my senior prom. And by that time, I'm like, I'm just fed up with this. I'm done. You know, I want to finish. That's what, you know, kids graduate May, something like that. And then in August, September, I'm going to an HBCU. I'm going to a Black college. So I expected, like, okay, maybe now I'm going to finally be able to fit in more. And that was not the experience at all. Number one, I'm weird. So
Okay, that one I can relate to.
yes, I'm like, you're probably going to get that. So, you know,
Yeah.
I'm weird. And then also, I didn't fully grasp the levels of colorism and what people expected me to be because I'm also light-skinned. I'm mixed. So there's certain stereotypes that go along there with, oh, she's light-skinned, she must be stuck up, she must think she's better than everyone. And then, you know, my weirdness, you throw that on top of it. Like at that time, I'm like playing World of Warcraft, and I make really stupid jokes, and I dance real goofy, and I'm really, really just
You're not fitting in.
naturally. No. So there was no fitting in there either. I did make a few friends, but by that time, couple years in, I was like, all right, well, so fitting in is not something I'm going to have in this lifetime. I'm rolling with it. Like, it's too late now to try.
You actually had that reaction in college?
For sure. Absolutely. I
Oh,
had a little,
I'm actually kind of jealous, like that you had that moment. So, I mean, just looking at it from a light worker kind of perspective, you know, like, wait, you decided in college that you're like, well, I'm not going to fit in. So like, damn, that's, whew. I know we're supposed to be talking
yes.
about, you know, the bad things that happen as well, but I just want to kind of give you a cheer right there. Um,
Yeah, I think I look at other people's stories and I feel like they went through, I mean, I went through a lot, but my level of acceptance made things, I think, a little bit faster than a lot of people have, because they just get so stuck in, okay, well, it should be this way. I just never, I never experienced how life should be my entire life. So I had this kind of rebellious streak, even from a small age, because my mom was, well, number one, she was white. Then you add on top of it, she was a teenage mom and she was single. And she had these two
oh,
little
you grew up
brown,
with a single mom.
yes,
So you didn't even have your black dad there when
no,
you were growing up in West Virginia.
nope.
Oh, you
I
were
sure,
all alone. Oh my God.
well, yeah, he was there, but he was 15 minutes away, but he never came around. So that was like another whole thing I had to deal with and unpack. And also, I think plays really well into a lot of realizations that I had around race in general. But I knew from I was very just aware that the odds were against me. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to be any sort of statistic. I'm talking like 7 or 8 years old. I was thinking like this.
Wow.
Um, and I would tell my mom, I'm not going to be a statistic. I'm going to college. I don't know what for. I'm going to be incredibly successful. I'm not getting pregnant as a teenager. You know, I would tell my mom all those things. And so that rebellious nature from being a little kid served me really well, because when I did deal with racism, even though it hurt, it also lit a fire in me.
Mm,
And I'm still carrying that fire.
mm,
Not in anger or resentment, but I carry it into how we can transform, how we can really affect change in this world. And I let all of that fuel me.
mm. I love that. That wonderful way of turning that energy around, you know. Um, just what I got while you were talking was, you know, we have these things in our lives. If we can just go down the rabbit hole a little bit, if you'll indulge me, but we have these things in our lives that are that we consider obstacles, and that can absolutely be obstacles. It doesn't mean that they can't be, but you know, it could be, you know, I mean, you kind of took on a lot. You were born a woman, mixed race, and weird. Jesus Christ, you know, like
Yeah.
you weren't ever going to make it easy on yourself. But we have these things, and I've discovered in my work that our greatest sort of challenges are the sources of our greatest power. And I love that you knew that from a really early age, that you're like, I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to use this as fuel. I'm not going to fall into this trap. I'm, you know, oh, you want me to conform? Fuck you. I can't conform, but I won't conform. You're like, you know, like,
Yeah.
I love that
I
you,
did dabble. I tried
yeah,
a couple times.
we all did. Yeah. We do try, but it's just, I love that you kind of had that really conscious understanding, instead of looking back and going, I kind of knew, like you're saying this to your mother, you're verbalizing this, that you are not going to let this be your weakness. You're going to use this as your strength, essentially. And I'm sure it wasn't an easy journey. I don't want to simplify the whole thing. I know we all get our asses kicked like massively as we go through this, but I just want to really honor that, because I think that's really beautiful that you had that strength of knowledge, you know, coming through you. So then you're experiencing being in a Black university and not really having the experience that you were hoping for. You're still not conforming. You're still not one of them. You're still not part of the group, which is also the light worker's dilemma, quite frankly. But here it is done through the lens of race. Then you went to Africa, you said. And I know that a lot of, I've heard people of color say this is like, Africa has a special meaning. It has a special reverence. There's also a lot of fantasy, I think, built around it that, of what Africa could be. And then you go there and you have the reality of it, but you're also doing this from a, additional shamanic point of view. So what was your experience of Africa, its energy, its, all, because I've been to Africa and I still want to have this conversation with you right now. I really, really do.
Oh, yeah.
Because I had my own energetical experiences over there, but through this lens, like, what was your experience of that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I noticed, because my first few trips, so I've during my initiation, which spanned 5 years, I traveled to Africa 3 times, visited 5 different countries, and each time I was there no less than a month and 3 months at the most. And I'm talking, most of that time was in the bush. I was not just living it up in, one of the big cities. I was mostly in the bush having that sort of experience. So what was really interesting to me, because I did also go the first couple times with groups, and I noticed that they would call all of us white. Even those of us that were African Americans, but dark skinned. So I asked about this, because of course I'm like, I'm light, but I'm not that light. So they took some time to really explain to me that what they are really referring to is a mindset. It's a way of being that they are referring to as white. And it's not just in Africa. This is, any indigenous groups that I've, had interaction with, they call us white because of the mindset, not because of the skin. So that was interesting. And we can unpack that a little bit because it definitely plays a role in racism as well. And then the most interesting that I really had to move through some of my triggers was when I was in my final stages of completing my initiation to become a Sangoma, which is a Zulu Shaman in South Africa. And in South Africa, there's no mixed. We're still called colored in South Africa. And then you add on top of it that there are many Black people there that don't believe that white people, and therefore colored people, mixed people, don't believe that we have ancestors. So there are people who would have this strong reaction to the fact that I'm there, I'm dressed in Sangoma clothing, and also my skin complexion. So then there was like this very complex experience that was happening. And luckily my spiritual mother is also mixed, and she unpacked some of these things for me, and she grew up there, so she could kind of communicate to me where their mindset is. And it is in some ways still segregated to a certain degree, where Black people live here, even separated by tribes still. So you might have the Zulu here, then you have Indians living here, there's quite a few Chinese living there, they live here. And really looking at the differences, I will tell you, in West Africa, being light-skinned, well, number one, I couldn't go shopping without having people stop to take my picture or take pictures with me. because I resemble the goddess Mami Wata. So
Oh,
they would.
That's kind of cool, though. Is that cool? That's
Yeah.
cool,
I mean,
right?
it wasn't bad, right? I mean, they're taking my picture because they're like, oh, you're beautiful. I got lots of marriage proposals every day.
Oh, so you're no longer weird bad. You're like weird goddess. Like, that's awesome.
That is awesome. So that, just seeing all the different lenses that, all the different perspectives that people put on what a skin color means.
Mm-hmm.
It got me to a place, because I spent a lot of time really just sitting with this and examining this. And of course, there's history behind why each group of people perceives skin color differently, and having the spiritual understanding that, guys, we are all one race. I realized that it's so amazing. I was so blessed. I grew up having my great grandmother and great grandfather, and they survived. My great grandfather passed when my son was like 4 months, and my great grandmother passed just a few years ago. And they are both white, grew up, well, my great grandfather grew up in Southern West Virginia. And to think about what his perspective was, what his mindset was. And he lived long enough to hold his great grandson, who is almost completely Black. My husband's Black. He
Wow.
had that experience. This is why it's so important that we really unpack this, because your entire thought of who you are, who your identity is, can change in just a few generations completely. And if we are still carrying the baggage of that perspective with us, it creates a level of dissonance inside, and separation, and a certain level of mental illness, even a self-hatred that happens because you have in your imagination what you think is reality, and reality is showing you it's not true at all. If we were different, if we were that different, we wouldn't be able to have children like this.
Yes, that's true.
And so that's the ideology that we then pass on, and that affects our relationship with our children, our relationship with our grandchildren. My mom had to deal with, and I'm still kind of unpacking, this disconnect between her and my grandfather. He finally came back around when I was grown, but because she had a child with a Black man, and also she was a teenager, he wasn't really around. And now he wants to have that because he's an elder now. And that perspective really created a lot of damage in the family.
Mm-hmm. So if I could ask you, really, some people might think this is a really controversial question, but is it fair to say, in your eyes, that race is really a belief system?
Absolutely.
A set of belief systems where we assign meaning to skin color, to facial features, to whatever, put in that pot. I heard a TED Talk the other day. I'm horrible with names. I never remember people's names, but I'm trying to get better at it. But this wonderful speaker said, the idea is that in common culture and children, how children are being taught right now, that race is real, but it doesn't matter anymore. And his message is race is not real, but it does matter. And I think one of the things that's so interesting is when, you realize that scientifically, there are no characteristics that it can be assigned to people of different races. Black people are not more athletic or stronger, or, it's like, there's no race where it's like, well, they have these characteristics. It's just not true. But we assign all this meaning to who we are, where we are on the hierarchy, what is better, what is worse, who is better at this, who is worse at that. Some white people can jump, is what I'm saying. No, I had to get to that.
I've seen it with my own eyes.
Yeah, it can happen.
Hey, my mom, white, and held some track records for jumping hurdles. It's real.
There you go. But it's the reason why I said this can be, obviously it's not controversial to you. You know what I'm saying, but I think that this can be a really controversial statement to make, because so much is invested in race. And particularly if you are perhaps the disenfranchised one, and you have all this pain, and that pain is so justified. Oh my God, it's so justified. And yet, in the justification of it, which is understandable and totally normal, because so many people have said over time, you don't get to feel this way. Your feelings don't matter. Your pain is not real. Your pain is not justified. Get over it. That in that justification, we can become stuck in thinking that this is a limitation bigger than it is, when in fact it is a mindset, which is why I perked up so much when you said in Africa, they call white, it's a white mindset. It has nothing to do with your color, which means you can be an African American who is really dark skinned, heavily pigmented, come over to America, and they're like, you white,
Yep.
Why are you white? Because you have a white mentality. And that, I would assume, would be shocking to any person of color coming from America, to be told that they have a white mentality. I cannot imagine that would be comfortable.
Yeah. So I actually, for spiritual teaching purposes, will use it in order to illustrate what's actually happening. If we look at history, why people in Africa say that we have a white mentality. And it's not just in Africa. Native Americans will say white people, and they don't mean by the color. They're talking about,
they don't mean Caucasian. They
mean how you think, and how, how the separation and the disconnection from nature, from each other. That's what they're talking about. And so it's really important that we start understanding that it is, when we're talking about racism, we are not talking about people. We are talking about when this began a few thousand years ago. Racism was created to serve the agenda of a group of people. Because you have to have a reason behind the colonization that's happened in the world. You have to have a reason behind it. And P.S., it didn't start with Black people. It actually, if you look at the history and examine it, and anyone can Google and spend some time doing just a little bit of research, it's not hard to find. In Europe, it started with this group of Europeans, Christian, and we're gonna colonize these pagans. Mm-hmm. And that's how it started, and then it spread, and then now you have to use something else, because at first it was, they're pagans. Now we have to also then pull in something else. And worldwide, spiritually, we had the idea that white meant pure and good. and holy. And black was related to the shadow, or, you know, the darkness, etc. And so even at first, it took a while for that to actually even catch on, and people would laugh at it, because the idea that someone could be white was just absurd, because no one's white.
Right.
No one's actually white.
And if we were, it would look really weird.
It would. Hey, maybe there's somebody, you know, out there with just paper white.
Victorian times, they put lead paint on their face.
They tried.
To make themselves look really, really white, right? And
right.
And then they got lead poisoning and died, but whatever.
Yes. But the entire construct was it was never about hate. It was not, it didn't come from a place of hate. It came from, this group over here has something we want: land, resource, you know, we're trying to conquer them. Well, we need to get our people on board with conquering them. So we have to have a reason.
Right.
So, okay, these people, they're black. They're associated with darkness. They aren't civilized, and we're civilized. I always laugh when I watch those. I really like watching historical type of shows. And I love to watch the ones about like the Vikings against the Christians, because it's just so ironic that the Christians will be like, we have to go destroy those pagans because they are barbaric. And then they would be doing the same
really barbaric things. I know. The language that the Romans used when they were going after the Gauls or the Celtics, or anyone really, is remarkably similar to the language used by the British coming over to North America, or, you know, the Spanish and going into South America, and using it as a justification, not just to commit barbaric acts, but to commit genocide, to enslave people, to, you know, you have to dehumanize people. You have to make them into these, you know, less than human barbaric, like all their rights and everything. Otherwise, I'm not sure that you can just go and kill them and subjugate them all, you know?
Well, from a spiritual perspective, right? We can pull that in a little bit. You and I understand that anytime that you have a belief, right? You have a belief about the world, you have a perspective about the world, you're hunting for evidence. That is how the ego works. It has to find evidence. So that's even why we can see, you know, science-backed racism for a long time, because they're literally trying to find evidence. That is how the ego works. You don't just go and do things. You know, no one does things thinking that they're being evil. Even Hitler did not think he was being evil. He justified it. He had to find evidence that he was right, there's nothing more dangerous than someone who believes that they're right.
Yeah.
Period. So, you know, a lot of people that are having this racism conversation, we're talking about it only in terms of, you know, the past 400 years in the United States. But the reason why I'm pulling in all of that history, and there's more, but that's the main thing that we have to really understand. The reason I'm pulling that in is because as a shaman, we don't care about symptoms as much as we care about the root cause.
Yes.
The root cause started about 2,000 years ago. We're not talking about 400 years. Yes, that part is extreme. That's it bubbling up. But this mentality goes back. And so we have to go all the way back to look at why, where, when. Okay, what was that stemming from? That's what we need to heal. That's what we have to heal in ourselves. It was coming from a place of Well, we have to understand that Europe was a very difficult place to live. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say for our ancestors, because my ancestors too came from Europe. I have half of my spirit gang came from Europe. Or at least, I don't know. I don't know the numbers, but some of them came from Europe. Europe was a very difficult place to live. And then you have Africa. And most of this really started in Egypt. We really want to get technical. And you have Egypt there. You have the Nile. You have, they're inventing paper. They're building pyramids. They have immense libraries. They've got food year round that's easy to grow. Then you have in Europe, it's difficult there. It's cold. Anyone that's been to Europe will tell you it is not like, sunny year round with just amazing everything. And so you have to, if you are going to say, hey, those people over there have more than what we have. They have, pyramids, they've got a whole governmental structure, etc. And we want that. So we're talking about the Romans coming and, trying to conquer Egypt. Well, now we have to have a reason for that, because it's not just you as a king coming to do that. You're trying to take an entire people with you. You're trying to take an army with you. You got to have support. So you have to come up with something. And so we have to also recognize that we have that root in us. We have to deal with the root cause of that. When I dealt with racism as a kid, it was disguised as hate, but underneath it, there was a level of scarcity, fear, some level of envy in some cases. Mm-hmm. That was the underlying energy. So that's what we have to address. It's not just us, talking about, well, if they would just stop hating, etc. It's when you feel like you're not abundant, and someone else is, or you feel like someone's more intelligent than you, or you feel like it's like when you have kids that are bullies. Kids that are bullies are not just kids that are bullies for no reason.
Yeah, no.
They're bullies because there's this deep, gaping wound inside of them. And I'm getting chills right now. We have a collective group of gaping wounds inside of all of us. And the only way for us to heal that is for us to heal that, for us to take responsibility for, I have a wound here that I need to address. I need to heal this. It's not going to be solved by just doing stuff on the surface level that just feels good. Like, okay, I donated, I started a donation subscription to a child in Africa.
I changed my avatar on Facebook. I commented on a blog post. I attended a rally. Right. I'm good now.
Yeah.
Racism is over.
I understand why people are doing those things, and I don't have any problem with, people expressing themselves, because it's just an expression. However, without the underlying part that nobody's seeing, you end up accidentally still perpetuating the same problem that you say that you're not for. It's like a catch-22. If you just don't deal with it, Well, you just don't deal with it. So you have to actually deal with it.
Problem.
Yes.
No matter what your heart says, you may be well-intentioned, but you're still part of the problem, which can then be even more devastating to face, which means that you probably don't face it for as long as you possibly can hold it off, and then, and keep going. I think you made some really, really good points in all of that. And I want to address a couple of them. I love to talk about this from an energetic perspective. I think that if you understand how energy works, you can see it on the micro level, the individual level, and the macro level, the societal level, the global level. It all works the same. It follows the same patterns. It follows the same progressions. And when you suppress something, you just try to change it through action. I always like to say trying to change things through actions is like trying to get healthy by putting vitamins in your poop. It's too late in the process. You have no leverage there. And we have made progress. Certainly we have, outlawed slavery. We have outlawed Jim Crow. We have the civil rights movement. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have done any of that. I'm glad we did, obviously, but simply changing a law doesn't change the energy that created the situation that made you have to put a law in place. Because really, quite frankly, if you have to put a law in place, there's probably something wrong. If you have to tell people not to murder because, well, it's against the law and you'll go to prison, instead of why the hell would you want to murder someone? Like, where's that coming from? So, not so much, why do you hate Black people? Why do you hate anyone?
Right.
What's that about? And I think that's something that is shocking to many people. As shocking as is to people like us to say, oh, that's shocking to you. But it is that energy hasn't gone away. That energy is alive and well. The energy of slavery is alive and well. The energy of oppression is alive and well. And you don't eradicate that by suppressing it and being in denial, essentially, just like we are in our own lives. Oh, if you don't take a look at your shitty marriage, you can't fix it,
Right.
And so we have to have that horrible awakening moment. That's always, we don't want to have it because it's uncomfortable, but like, oh crap, this has actually been going on all along, and it's never actually gone away because we never actually healed the wounds. And the fact that you were talking about, we all have a series of wounds. I totally agree with that. It's like if we're all cells in the same body, and I believe that we are. Even if you can say, well, the lungs are infected and I'm the big toe, it doesn't really have anything to do with me. It does, because you're being fed by that blood. And quite frankly, if the lungs don't make it, you won't either.
Right.
Like the whole organism dies. And so we're all sick. We're all sick. The whole body has been sick for a long time. And it's not just parts of it. And by the way, you can't just cut off the right leg because you don't agree with it. You're just like, right. Oh, well, you heal it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so this healing has to take place on both sides. And I think that in order to do that, we have to also acknowledge some ugly truths that maybe we've been running away from, that people who are hurting others, and I know that for a lot of people that is going to be kind of controversial, the idea of having compassion for the people who are oppressing others. And yet that's what healing looks like. It means taking that step forward. And I kind of want to put it out there. It's like, look, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to force yourself to do that. Anyone out there like listening to this going, fuck you, Melody, like you don't get it. Okay, maybe I don't. And that's why I brought Makhosi here, because hopefully she gets it a lot more than I do.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, number one, yes, you eventually do get to a place of compassion. But if we're going to go back to energy.
Yeah.
You don't start with compassion. So in the Black community, there is this idea, because I'm just going to go ahead and just say it.
Be blunt, please.
Blunt. Black people, we have this way that was intentionally conditioned into us around forgiveness. You just forgive. You just go straight to forgiveness. That's why you will even see a mother whose son was just murdered by police go on camera bawling, saying that she forgives him. That's not actually what's happening.
No.
That's bypassing.
But I did not know that Black people were conditioned to have to forgive, essentially.
So there is, if you look, oh gosh, I can't think of the name of it, but it is very, very popular. It was a book written by a plantation owner. And it was about how to control.
Oh my God,
Negroes.
William Lynch's book?
William Lynch's book, thank you.
Yeah, just got recommended to me on my list immediately. Yes.
Yes.
Apparently,
so in that book,
very powerful.
yes. So that he talks about how they used the Bible to indoctrinate them into multiple ways of being, essentially justifying their slavery through the Bible. And then, also in the Bible, it says, serve the Lord as you would your master, and, all of this about forgiveness. But on a healing level, forgiveness, or let's not call it forgiveness because I can go on a whole tangent about forgiveness. Let's call it getting to a stage of compassion. You don't get there easy. Anger comes first. So the fact that
with you. Yes.
people are angry, while we don't want that to be the ultimate goal, it is at least a sign that, okay, I'm feeling an emotion and now I'm ready. I can move up the scale. Now, some people get trapped, right? Let's be honest. Most people get trapped and then they just find themselves stuck in anger. But we also don't want people to just be bypassing. So you do eventually get to compassion. And the thing that I really took some time to understand was, in ancient spirituality and also in indigenous cultures, when you have someone that does something terrible, like murder someone in your tribe, it's everyone's like, okay, what did we do? Not what did he do? What did we do? Where did we go wrong? What is this illness that we have?
That this
because
was the end result of
that he got to this point, that we allowed him to go this long without healing something that we didn't see, that he could get to the point where he would destroy the life of someone else, but really himself. If we understand that on an energetic level.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So then the way that they would typically deal with this, and this isn't true for every single one, every tribe, I'm speaking in generalities here, but typically you're not going to exile that person. There's no putting them in a prison. There is, okay, call the shaman. Okay, all of us are going to come around this person and we're going to hug them and we're going to love on them and we're going to heal them. And then also we're going to examine ourselves. Mm-hmm. We're going to sit here and have some conversations around what's going on in us, that this was a manifestation that popped up in our group. So this idea, like, okay, yes, if you are the victim of an experience, there's a certain healing that has to happen. Yeah. You have to heal from that. So in the context of racism, Black people have so much to heal from, so much trauma in the DNA. I see Black women and I see them, I'm getting chills again. I see them and I can, it's one of my gifts, but it's also just hurts me because I can see the pain. I can see it that sometimes they don't even recognize it.
Mhm.
But then white people think, there's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of shame about it. But also it's a level of trauma. Trauma is any elevated experience. It is unnatural for a human being to hit another human, to destroy another human being. To do that creates trauma in the DNA that then gets passed down. And the trauma is still there. It's in the DNA.
Yes. Yes.
There's trauma on both sides. Different types of trauma, but trauma nonetheless. Both sides have to heal their unique challenge. Heal this unique aspect, because there's both sides that have happened, but both sides have to heal. And if people refuse to look at it on either side, because I see some Black people who are like, all that has to be done is white people just need to fix it. They just need to fix their shit. This is their problem. They need to fix that shit. Well, yes, on some level, that needs to happen. But we also have to heal the residue of being on the receiving end, and then also how we perpetuate, because it is a mindset. I even came to the realization, and there's been multiple realizations. I had one, and then I'm going to pull my father back into this story. I had a realization pretty early on that I was perceiving Black men in a certain way because of my father living 15 minutes away but never coming. And I literally have 3 memories of him. One of them was of him shooting my brothers with a BB gun. He shot all of us, but it really traumatized me to see him shooting my brothers with this BB gun. Another was him offering me drugs at 13. And the other was I even 13? I was maybe 13. And then the other was was him leaving me on my birthday, because he never came around for anything. And he finally took me out for my 11th birthday, out to eat, just he and I. And I'm the only girl. I'm the oldest. I have 5 younger brothers with different mothers. Well, I have 1 brother by 1 mom, but so on. And so I was so excited, because every little girl wants to be daddy's little girl, even if your daddy has problems. And I knew my dad had problems. We still want that. So he came and he picked me up and he took me out to eat. And then he left me sitting there. As soon as the food was ordered, he let me order whatever I want. So I'm excited. Then he left me sitting there. And he went outside and to talk to a woman. And he just left me there for almost 2 hours in that restaurant. And then when he was finished, he came and he was like, "Was your food good?" And I said, "Yes." And he took me home. And I realized some years later that I was perceiving Black men through that lens. I had created a story about Black men that was then reinforced by society that says Black men are terrible fathers, that Black men are not, they don't get married, they sell drugs, they da-da-da-da-da. And that's what I kept attracting into my life. And when I realized, wait a minute, that's where that came from. And I'm perpetuating, I am over here telling people that this is what Black men are. Yeah. And I consciously chose and said, no more. I'm going to find evidence that there are good Black men, that they are amazing, and et cetera, et cetera. And I went out and I found things like, the truth is that Black men actually are the most active in their children's lives. That's a truth. That's a statistic.
That we never hear.
No one ever hears that. That is a true statistic. Go Google it. I'm not making it up. Black men are the most involved fathers of any skin complexion. And then I also started looking for evidence that Black men get married, and that Black men are intelligent and educated, and that they are hard workers, or, you know, all of these things. And I put my focus on that. And that's what I manifested. My husband and I, we've been together 11 years. He's an amazing father. He's an amazing human being. But that's also part of the work that we have to do as Black people. And white people also have to understand that they're carrying those biases around. And it's not just white people. So I'm going to pull in every single race. Race is, you know, quote unquote race. Every single race is perpetuating these biases about Black people, also about each other.
Yeah.
And it causes so much harm. So much harm. I think it was, I just read it a couple days ago. There was a study done about, I think it was seniors in medical school. And they found that 50% of these people who are about to become doctors believed that Black people did not feel pain as much as white people. And that has been my experience. I've experienced that. I have had doctors not believe me when I say I'm in pain. When I had my C-section, they didn't give me enough medicine. When they did the block. And I was like, I can still feel my legs. And they cut me anyway. Oh. This is what happens when we don't address these statistics and also this mindset that we are all carrying. It's an infection that we've all got.
I think you made such an important point. I want to shine a bigger light on it. I felt it was really significant to highlight this, which is that, because, you know, you said a lot of Black people kind of feel like the answer to racism is white people just need to fix it. And as you probably know, there's a lot of white people who feel the same way about, you know, racism, and Black people just need to fix it, you know, and maybe we'll help. You know, I was doing another interview like this yesterday, and one of the things, you know, that came up is that I think a lot of white people, social justice warriors, and people who think they want to help, they're coming from a good place, but they're coming at this from a neutral position. If you're, you know, first of all, let's understand that Caucasians have a race. We have a cultural race. We are affected by that race. There's a whole belief system that goes along with what that is and what that means. And so when people say don't bring race into this, what they really mean is don't bring your race into this. My race is already in it, right? But the idea that we can come at this from a neutral point of view, because racism isn't our problem, but we'll come and help, and not realizing like how disrespectful that is, you know, to pretend like it's got nothing to do with us, but we'll come and help if you need our help. We're good neighbors, you know.
Yes, saviorism.
Yeah, and that mentality of coming at it from a neutral point of view, I think you've taken this conversation a bit further. I might have to publish these all in order because these conversations seem to be building on each other, but which makes total sense. But the idea that you're not coming at this from a neutral point of view, not just because you didn't grow up in a state or in a family where racism was a big thing. Maybe your family didn't hate Black people. Maybe your family didn't actively do anything to oppress anyone. But the wounds are there. You have inherited the wounds, because until they are healed, they're going to be there. So you are not coming at this, because I'm always trying to think, is like, how do you explain this in a way that people can wrap their heads around it, who are like, but I've never oppressed anyone, so I'm not in this, you know? And it's like, well, how do you logically break this down? And I think this thing you mentioned is a great piece of that puzzle to add to that, to say, you are carrying the wounds of your ancestors. You are carrying the wounds of that's where the guilt and the shame and of the person who beat the person on the plantation. Yeah, maybe it wasn't you, and maybe it wasn't your father, maybe it was your grandfather, but you were carrying that wound. And that's what you bring to the table. You cannot come to this as a neutral party. It's just not possible. There's no such thing
there's none.
Party in this. We are all wounded by this, from this. The behavior stemmed from the wounds. And if we can go into those wounds and heal them, and that is the taking the responsibility for the race, you know, for racist behavior, for racism, for that energy. It is not saying, you know, because I know there's a lot of defensiveness in the white community where, it's not all white people, I get that, relax white people, but it's, you know, people genuinely stuck in the mindset of, but I didn't do that. I didn't own any slaves. I've never oppressed anyone. And, you know, we could talk about the systemic racism and how we all benefit from that, you know, without even meaning to, without even realizing it. And yet we have to look at that as well. But just to keep it on this point for now, which is, I think it's so important to highlight that and explain that, you know, you can be the most loving person in the world. You can never have hurt a Black person or held any hate against anyone ever. And you are still carrying this wound. And it is going to change how you engage. It's going to change how you approach people. And this is where you get white people who don't hate Black people, who will not talk about race out of intense fear of getting it wrong, of stepping over the line, of getting a backlash, of getting attacked. Not because Black people are so dangerous, but because of all that guilt and shame. Where do you think all that guilt and shame came from? If you didn't actually have an incident in your life where you actually murdered someone, you're carrying the wound. And I think that's going to bring a lot of, I'm feeling aha moments, you know? So I think that was such an important thing to highlight, that this ancestral line, that these wounds get carried forward and forward and forward until they are healed.
Yes. So that's why a lot of people don't fully understand that when we're talking in shamanism, if we're talking about spirit, we're talking about the spirit of something, we're talking about the DNA. So when we say the ancestral spirit, we are saying in your DNA, in the coding of your DNA, there is no person, there is not a single person on this planet that is completely themselves.
Yeah.
You are the culmination of your ancestors in the now. They are you and you are them. And when you heal, they say, 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. We don't have to get into all the metaphysics of that. But
you heal the energy of it. You heal the line, and it even if somebody doesn't believe that you can heal it backwards and forwards, you are healing a wound that from that point on that pattern doesn't have to continue. You are interrupting the pattern if somebody feels more comfortable with that.
Absolutely. So if we just look at the numbers, well, clearly, especially here in the US, Black people cannot fix this. It's not going to happen. We carry a lot of purchasing power, not as much, and we don't have the numbers. So even if every single Black person healed themselves, because that's all we can do, is just heal ourselves. It still doesn't get healed. It only gets healed when white people say, you know what? I'm taking responsibility for myself and for my healing and addressing my guilt and addressing my shame and addressing that even though I didn't intend it, like once we become conscious, we start to become more aware of certain things. And just if you just look at TV, if you just look at an ad, everything that comes across is essentially, I've read my son's textbooks. I see everything that comes through there is from a lens of white being superior. Yeah. There's even a way, when the textbooks teach certain history, there's even a way that it's taught. For example, the fact that in school, in school, we learn that basically Black people started with slavery. Like there's nothing about, unless you consciously go search for it, you don't get any African history.
Because that's when they entered white people's story.
Exactly.
And it's irrelevant before then to the white person's story.
Exactly. So that is in you. If you are white, that is in you. When you turn on the TV and every hero is a white man, every damsel in distress is a white woman. Oh, but every time you see a Black woman, there's some shows you barely even see a Black woman. My husband and I, sometimes we count. We sit and we just count and laugh. Because, what else can we do except laugh? Because most of the shows, there's maybe one Black person.
To be the sassy Black friend of the main white protagonist, right?
Always. And always have to be the strong one. Mm. So we can never have emotions. We can never need help. A lot of the work that I do, to be honest, with Black women, is helping them to understand that they can be vulnerable, that they can actually ask for help. I have to help them heal being able to ask for help. That's tragic.
It is.
It's tragic. And then we wonder why, statistically, Black people suffer from things like heart disease and diabetes and it's very stressful. It's very tiring to be Black, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's tiring every time we go out in public. And I would be driving, especially in West Virginia. There for a little while I worked for a direct sales company. And I had to have an entire routine around if they sent a client to me, because I know how I sound on the phone, and my name, my first name is Candace. I would have to figure out a way for them to see me before I came. I didn't always succeed, because I'm like, I don't want to show up there and a Black woman is on their porch.
So springing your Blackness on them was a dangerous thing to do.
Yes. And these would be parties, West Virginia, there is so much that's just out in the middle of nowhere. So, and by the way, I did have experiences where someone met me on the doorstep, just absolutely terrified that a Black person showed up, and told me, well, we never have your kind out here. I would have to, and by the way, I did the party anyway, and they paid me a lot of money. They did pay me a lot of money. And I had to educate them while I was there because I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take them just having no idea.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I had to have an entire routine around, okay, I had a plan. If corporate sends me a party, I have to make them add me on Facebook so that they can see me before I come, so that they know. And if there's a problem, they'll cancel. And some of them did cancel. And if I'm going, I have to also make sure to have my husband check my car, make sure my car is okay. And I also have to make sure I have a full tank because I don't want to get stuck on the side of the road.
Oh my God.
Helpless.
This is so interesting because the way you're talking about this is the way that a white woman would talk about going to a black neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I have to make sure
Yeah.
my car's okay, my tires are all right, I have enough gas in my thing, I'm just gonna make sure. And with an added thing that, you know, this would all kick off because they saw you as black. So there's it's not exactly the same, of course. There's an added dimension in your story, but I think that that's another one of those eye-opening aha moments to realize like how much fear you're going into that situation, how much preparation to mitigate that fear, how much like, okay, do I have an escape route? Do I have an alternate escape route? What if those both fail? Do I have a third escape route? Do I have a parachute with me? Do I have, like, how do I get out of this if it goes bad? Like you're going into a hostage negotiation situation that could turn bad at any minute, but it's funny, but it's not, right? Because that's really what people are going through. And white people are sitting there so scared of black people, not realizing that black people are fucking terrified of white people and fearful.
Terrified. So I've had multiple instances. We get pulled over a lot. I got pulled over. This one's a really funny one to illustrate how dramatic it is. I was with my girlfriend, my best friend, and I was in the front seat. She was driving. It was her car. We're, 17 or so, 17, maybe 16. And then our boyfriends are in the back. Both of our boyfriends are black. We literally get in the car in front of my house. A cop pulls us over before we even pull out and has me and our boyfriends get out of the car while he and had us put our hands on the car while he checked to make sure that she was okay and that we hadn't abducted her. It's her car. She's driving. We're in front of my house and we're teenagers. It happens all the time. So we have this way, and I don't want to speak for every single black person, but there is an expectation that we carry that and I've had to really work through this as a spiritual person and understanding energy, especially becoming a mom, because we've had certain experiences that have been traumatizing for us. And I've done a lot to move through so many of them. I can't even go through all of them. That's how many there are. And then we think also that we are, we want to protect our children. And so we have entire conversations amongst ourselves about how we can prepare our children from a young age. We had to do it with my son when he was 4 because he was called the N-word. And he just turned 4. And we had to have a conversation about what it meant. And even now we're still working with him because he wants to believe that he's white. He has the same complexion as me. And he's like, Daddy is black. I'm white. And he associates his skin color with my mom. He says I'm the same skin color as Mimi. And so part of the challenge that I've been facing as a conscious woman and mother is I understand how energy works. And so I know if I teach him that these things might happen to him and what to do in those instances, that actually creates an energetic magnet and likelihood that he will see that and experience that. And the other part of me is like, well, we live in a time where maybe he won't experience it at the same level. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to poison his mind to expect that like we expect it. But it's like, what do I do? Do I prepare my child for what is, or not prepare him and kind of pray that
you're
more,
right.
yeah, that he doesn't have to experience that.
Are you planting a seed of fear in him? Or are you preparing him to deal with the fear he probably already has? Or are you, not preparing him thinking, well, all is love and light, but it isn't yet. No. This would be incredibly difficult. Honestly, I don't know exactly what I would do, because, it's easy from the outside to give advice, but when it's your kid and you don't want to see them killed, the stakes are very, very, very high.
And he's a Black boy.
Yeah.
Like, we have conversations about this amongst ourselves, about our Black boys specifically. Because, and then you add on top of it, my husband's tall and my father and brothers are tall. Like, my kid is huge. Mm-hmm. He already gets so much more challenge because he looks 2 or 3 years older than he is. People treat him very differently than other kids his age because he looks older. And then you add on top of it that he's Black. I've seen it with my own eyes that there's this weird thing that's happening. And, I think for me, I don't live in that space of fear anymore. Eventually I got to the place where I just understood where this is coming from. And although I don't believe that I'm the person to just like go out and just like, it's my duty to educate white people about Black people. I don't believe that's my job. However, whenever I do come across people, that is kind of where my weirdness helps, my being on the outside of any of any groups, even though I'm part of them at the same time, is I just as an embodied being am not the stereotype. So it automatically creates this, wait a minute, huh? Mm-hmm. You're not anything of what I envisioned.
You're a bit of a pattern interrupter,
Yes. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with any Black person being their authentic self. They should fully be themselves. Yeah. But what it does is it's a pattern interrupt for them to say, wait a minute, this is not a caricature. Yeah. This is not an actress playing a role that was written for her by a group of white men.
Right.
This is an actual human being. Black people are diverse. We go to Comic-Con. We have families. We make money. I skateboarded.
Business ideas.
We travel. We're joyous. We're very cool in most instances. My cool brand is kind of weird, but the only way that this is actually going to be resolved in any real way is for white people to say, by just my sheer existence here, I have a role in this. I'm not outside of it. And also not to lead with saviorism. That is one of the worst things that you can do, is to believe that you're going to save Black people. And a lot of, it just kind of it soothes the guilt, but it disempowers and has the opposite effect. The absolute opposite effect. Absolutely.
Because why would I need to save you except for because you're so weak and you can't save yourself? Right. You know, why would I need to speak for you and fight your fight for you unless you can't fight it yourself? It's still saying you're incapable, you're too weak, you're not strong enough. And, you know, one of the things that this may help women, it might not help men. Poor white men right now, Jesus, they're having to accept so much stuff that they haven't seen. But, you know, the way I think of it, when to kind of bring it full circle, but the thing that kicked all this off was that I channeled a message from George Floyd for a student. And one of the things he said very strongly, and not the man he was on earth, I don't know him, I don't know that frequency, but I called him in and he came with friends to help. And he said, you cannot speak for us. And I sat with that a bit because I knew that there was more to that than I was understanding. You cannot speak for us. You cannot speak for us. And then what came to me was like, I don't care how well-intentioned a man is. Could be the nicest guy in the world, biggest heart in the world, sweetheart. Don't talk for me. Don't get up on a podium and talk about women's rights issues instead of letting me talk about women's. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. You can't know what you're talking about. You didn't live this. And so I think, you know, white people need to understand that no matter how well-intentioned we are, it's not our story. We need to go deal with our own goddamn story instead of everybody else's story, trying to tell everybody else's story. It's not our story. Maybe we're afraid that we don't have a story. I don't know. It's not our fight to fight this fight. It's, you know, to advocate, to be an ally is to support, to be a healer is to assist. Can't actually heal anybody. They have to heal themselves. You are assisting with that. And if they won't, you can't force it on them, you know? But it's also, it kind of lets you off the hook in terms of responsibility of fixing something, you know, but I think it's also, from an energy point of view, always a classical sort of, oh, I'll go help you so I don't have to deal with my own shit. So I'm going to hoist my help upon you, whether you like it or not, whether it's the right help or not, because then I don't have to deal with my own crap, right? And so something that I've been using, and you can absolutely speak on this because maybe I don't have it right, you know, but something I've been using when people have been asking me, white people have been asking me, you know, like they're telling me like how they want to go out and advocate or whatever. And I'm kind of like, ugh. Why don't you go talk to a Black person? Why don't you go talk to a Black person and see if that's actually what they fucking need, instead of you thinking you can figure this all out when you have no idea what the actual problem is, you know? Run this by somebody. Like, do you have Black friends? Yes, I do. Go ask them. Like, you know, I'm thinking about doing this. So I'm thinking about, you know, I'm not going to name names, but, you know, prominent marketer who's very, very white and just apparently found out that racism exists. And he was, you know, tweeting about it and like, oh my God, I just found this out. Like, you know, light bulb. And okay, well, good for you, honey, you know. But then he's like, well, I'm going to go ahead and make this documentary. We're going to invest like $100,000 in a documentary to like highlight what is happening. And he got a lot of pushback for that. and then a very eloquent Black person came in and said, why don't you give the money to a Black director to tell that story? Because like, it's not really your story. You can't tell that story. Like, we get it. You want to help, but and I thought, this is a person who has $100 million business, who was in a position to go and call someone, ask someone, call the NAACP, find out how
you
can
can find a Black person.
Yeah, you can find a Black person, right? How can I help, rather than, well, I want to help and here's what I'm doing, because that's about you. That's about you feeling better that you've done something. Mm-hmm. That's not about the person that you're wanting to help. This is how I see it. But whereas if you really wanted to help, the first question is, hey, can I help? I would like to help. How can I help? Do you want my help? No? Then walk away. And because that person gets to decide that, mm-hmm. Then maybe ask somebody else, like, hey, I would like to help. Who do you think would accept my help? Instead of, well, this is the problem because you won't let me save you. Like, the arrogance in that, right? But there's so much defensiveness in that, because people get their feelings hurt because they want to help, and then they don't bother asking first. So they're hoisting it. It's basically unsolicited advice, which none of us like. Nobody wants to be sitting there doing something, have somebody else come along, I'll just do this for you because you're clearly incompetent. And that's why people react that way. So if you're getting that reaction from Black people, it's because you're essentially saying to them, you're incompetent, you're weak, let Whitey handle it. And I like to be pretty brutal with my sort of comparisons, because people then kind of go, oh, I don't want to be that, right?
Yeah.
But hopefully this kind of conversation, these conversations are showing people that if you approach it with humility and openness and say, like, oh, what do you think? There's a lot of information forthcoming. You get a lot of ideas on how you can actually help. And it's totally okay to say, how can I help? But it also has to be okay for whoever you're talking to say, you can't, get away from me, because they may not want to play with you and they have no obligation to play with you. And that doesn't mean that now, well, this is how they stay disempowered because they won't let me help. You are not the savior, Yeah. But maybe take a look at why that hurts, what hurts inside, what is uncomfortable. Why is it so hard to go talk to a Black person? What do you think is going to happen? Take a look at that. Because that's really kind of my goal with these conversations, is to demonstrate a way of doing it. Not the only way, but a way of doing it, to have these conversations, to show that, oh, wait, it's not scary to have these conversations. So I hope you enjoyed it as well. I got a lot out of it, but
I did. I would say too, I just want to also add to what you said, because it's we can really just summarize all of this, that the mind fears the unknown. Yeah. So the more that you know, the less fear that you will have. And the more we're going to be able to really consciously create a much grander vision for the future.
Yes. I love that. So if you're afraid, it's because you're ignorant.
go get some knowledge. Watch.
Go get some knowledge.
Find something. Read a book.
Crack a book. Once again, you can find Makhosi at theroyalshaman.com. We're going to put the information on the screen and underneath the video, so you can connect with her in various different ways if you want to check her out, or maybe even hire her if you have a business and you want the best of the best. Makhosi's your girl.
The best of the best.
Best of the best, bitches. So once again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. And yeah, I appreciate everybody who's willing to listen to this.
Yes.
Many hours. So
I congratulate everyone that listens to this.
Yes. Yes. You're on your way. You're one of us. So thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for watching this installment of Conscious Conversations. If you're a person of color or other group whose voice needs to be heard, and you'd like to participate in a public conversation like this, or if you know someone who would be perfect for this format, please contact me through my website at melodyfletcher.com. Otherwise, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. Did you enjoy this format? Were there any aha moments? Were you left with more unanswered questions that you may want us to answer in future conversations? Did you get uncomfortable? If you're a person of color, do you feel that your perspective was represented? Let me know in the comments. All voices are welcome, but we do ask that you keep it respectful and constructive. In other words, what you have to say is important, just don't be a dick about it. Until next time, I'm Melody Fletcher, and thank you for bringing your light to the world.